NEPM's podcasts are funded by Armbrook Village Senior Living in Westfield, offering assisted living and compass memory support with evidence-based treatment for those with memory loss. More at armbrookvillage.com. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, offering solar options, energy security, and solutions for the local community. Learn more at northeast-solar.com.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Happy last day of the 7th month. That's actually the 9th month. Thanks, Augustus.
My birthday's in there, so I'll allow it. Later in the show, the Food Bank of Western Mass has a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and we'll head to their newest parcel to check out the lay of the harvest and hear more of how direct agriculture is helping them alleviate hunger in the 4 counties.
We'll also steel our nerves for some classic spooky celluloid in Williamstown when we chat with Dan Hudson, Executive Director of Images Cinema, about the offerings for their Nightmare on Spring Street series.
And it turns out that there is a pretty significant way in which the sky we see at night was very different from that of the dinosaurs.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
Time for some more Kitchen Table Astronomy with Hampshire College astronomer Dr. Salman Hamid, Mr. Universe. Not only from Hampshire College, but from Kainat, where you are using the means of the internet to show the world what the universe is like with these incredible videos. And you will be traveling the world shortly to do the same thing, some citizen science talks and communicating science in China. And China is part of the topic of our conversation today.
Yes, so there is a conference about public science communication, and I'm giving a talk on challenges and promise of communicating science in different cultures. So I do, of course, on Fabulous 413. So Fabulous 413 will feature in the talk.
Cool.
But also in Pakistan or audience in South Asia. So what kind of things in a global context, what we talk about is also potentially listenable, if that's a word, around the world. And so what kind of promises it brings, but what kind of challenges it also brings, because, and one of the things that my focus is about knowing your audience, because you should always, in science communication, target audience. Who's your audience? That's how you talk about it. That's what your interest is. But in a globalized world, that actually presents you with a challenge of who you are talking to and how it gets interpreted. Mm-hmm. So that's my talk over there. And of course, there is some excitement because I still don't have my visa yet.
Yeah, I was going to ask Congressman McGovern to help out, but the Chinese don't love him.
Yeah, so I'm not asking him, but I'm just hoping, to get visa in time. I'm hoping that I'm not talking to you in 2 weeks when I'm in China, but otherwise, Monty, I'll spend more time with you.
Okay, that should be great too. But China, we've talked about this for years now. There is a sort of space race brewing between the United States and China. The United States has all sorts of projects with lots of countries around the world, China oftentimes excluded. So then China goes and starts its own thing and excludes the United States. China, though, has been doing some incredible stuff on the moon.
Right, but to be fair, I should mention that China did make, so they are the ones who have gotten samples from the moon lately. Mm-hmm. And those are the first samples both from the near side and from the far side. And from the far side, nobody has ever gotten samples. But this is the first time
Except from the Pink Floyd album. That is such a sampleable album. Like, you could work that into so many different, hip-hop songs or whatever.
But it all has to do with money.
Yo, D, man, what's up with that cash registration?
Yeah, right.
As you know.
That's the good one to do.
Right. And also with us and them, I have to mention when we're talking about moon and China and the US. So, anyways, and lunatic.
The lunatic is on the grass.
So here is the thing. China actually sent a mission Chang'e 5, which brought rocks from the near side of the moon. But this is where it comes in that in science, even though you go here is a rivalry, so on and so forth, but within the sciences, you are always learning from the other, and you are building on the knowledge and information you have from others as well. So Apollo and the Russian Luna mission, they're the ones who had gotten rocks back, and Apollo astronauts, of course, brought a lot of rocks back. But it suggested, which is a reasonable assumption, that moon has not been active for a few billion years.
And by active, you mean in a plate tectonics, volcano, underground sense.
Right. So when you have planets or the way the moons form, there is heat at the center, but if you are smaller bodies, you basically go inert. You run out of heat, and so nothing much is happening. Unless you have plate tectonics, which most places don't. Earth does. Or if you have larger bodies, you have enough radioactive material that it can keep the center hot. And for the moon, we know that it had volcanism because
Spock lived there.
Fascinating.
but you can actually look up at the moon and you see these darker spots, and those are, we call them mare or seas, but those are actually not water. But in fact, when Galileo actually looked at them through the telescope as well in 1610, he saw them and he goes like, well, they look like seas. They look like Maria. That's what he said, But now we know actually those are volcanic areas. There was volcanic flow.
So the face of the man in the moon, or person in the moon, that's all done because of volcanism.
That's exactly right. So, but that volcanism was around, and because of the Apollo missions, they went in, brought samples back, lunar mission, Russian lunar mission, and that volcanism they could actually date to about 3 billion years ago. There was an active bombardment on the moon, and volcanism on the moon actually around 3 to 3.8 billion years ago. And everybody was like, okay, that makes sense. There was volcanism earlier on, but now it doesn't happen because we don't expect it to be volcanically active. But there was a lunar reconnaissance orbiter. This was a NASA mission, American mission actually. And it looked at some features on the moon that looked like, well, they're a little odd. And they said, well, we would call them, as astronomers are great with names, irregular mare patches. Because they were irregular, they were mare, and they were like patches. And so, and they have a cool acronym, IMP.
Imp.
Right? And so they look like, and you can actually look at them and you can assess, you can say something about their age based on the number of craters that you see on them. So because moon doesn't have an atmosphere, so everything that goes in, it actually hits on the moon and it forms a crater. So even if you have a smaller thing or a bigger thing or and all of these things. So this is how astronomers, by counting the number of craters, can determine if the surface that you are looking at is younger or not. So if you have fewer craters, that means it's relatively younger. If you have more craters, it means it's relatively old. Simply because if you had more craters, then it would have been wiped out.
Yeah, look at my bald head. The older I get, every little dent or nick that I get in there, it's there forever. When I was younger, my bald head looked fine. Now it's got this weird growth. It's got this scar from when I was playing on a playground 2 years ago.
And there are some irregular hair patches over there. So
right, so you can tell, yeah.
Exactly.
And I have no atmosphere up there, a la hair, so everything just hits it.
So that's how astronomers looked at it, and it looked like that there were areas, these patches, these imps, are maybe a few 100 million years old, or maybe even younger, maybe 50 million years. But this was an indirect assessment. This was just looking at it from the craters. And so Chang'e 5 mission,
The Chinese mission
that went in 2020 and brought samples back. So it deliberately, the place that it picked was a relatively younger place. And that was about, the surface was expected to be around 1 billion year old or something like that. So they knew what Apollo missions had found, what lunar missions had found. And so they were like, okay, so let's complement that. So this is how science works. You go like, okay, we don't want to just go back to the same place because we know what we found from there. But let's go to a place which can actually find something new and complement what we already know and answer some of the newer questions that were raised. So they went to this other place. It's called Mons Rumker, and so mountain of Rumker. And so that is a place that has this volcanic slope. So there were some place where there was some volcanism, maybe a little bit sooner than 1 billion years or so. It went over there, brought some samples, a few pounds of it. I think it's about 4 pounds, little less than 2 kilograms. And recently, a paper got published in the journal Science from a lab that assessed that, and this lab is part of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. And what they did was they looked at a tiny fraction of it, about 1.7 grams. They analyzed the material in there, and they found 3,000 glass beads. And these beads are a few, 20 to 40 microns in size. So they're really tiny beads. And they are formed, oftentimes, when meteoroids hit, and the material heats up a little and then it forms a tiny bead. But also they get formed when you have some volcanism in there. So they can also get formed in there. But the two types of beads, volcanism versus the ones from meteoroid impacts, have a little bit different ratio of elements that are in there. And so they looked at 3,000 of those beads, and they found that out of those 3,000 glass beads, 3 seem to be from volcanism. First of all, just imagine, just think about it. You have sort of this tiny sample of the moon rock that you are analyzing. In it, you find something interesting. There are these 3,000 very tiny beads, and out of that, you analyze the elements that are in there. And in particular, there's a ratio of sulfur in a particular way that comes out, and you go okay, well, this ratio, it determines that this was formed by a volcanic eruption versus it was formed in a meteoroid impact. And so those 3 of them they found, it actually gives a very specific date, because if you have a sample, you can actually do radioactive dating, and you use uranium for that, lead to uranium ratio, for example, and they found that these particular beads are about 120 million years only.
Which is wicked old, unless you're talking about the age of the universe, when we thought it was going to be 1 billion years ago, at least, that there was volcanism on the moon. This is saying much, much more recently, in astronomical time, there was volcanoes on the moon.
And the cool thing is, the first thing they thought about was wait a minute. The dinos were around at that time, and they would have looked at the moon and they were like, hey, what's that red stuff?
Oh, wow. Wouldn't that be cool?
That would be cool. And so it just shows that in this particular case, in these samples, so it's a pretty solid result. This is a result because of radioactive dating. So previously, the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter had just looked at it from orbit using crater counting, but this actually really nails down the particular age of it. And it's clear that there was volcanism on the moon only 100 million years ago. And maybe there may be some places that are even sooner. And so why that is the case? I'm sure, Monty, you're going to ask that question.
Why is that the case?
Great question, Monty. We don't know. Well, but that really brings up this question, right? So here is this thing, the usual theory of how the solar system formed, how planets form, how their moons form, and moon is not that big. It should not have this kind of active volcanism 100 million years ago. But it did. And so you really have to reassess that. So perhaps there are ideas around it. Maybe there is some rare earth material, there is some radioactive materials that actually have some low-scale volcanism that actually allowed it. But this is something that we did not expect. And if that is the case, there are a couple of things that go from there. One, well, who's to say that it may not happen today? Or
we could look up and see lava flows on the moon.
Right, and it may not be that big, but and there are some things called, which people have talked about. There is some lunar transient phenomena. Some people have claimed, they see something, some amateur astronomers have also seen, but they have usually been dismissed as potentially atmospheric effects or observational effects and things like that. But there are claims for, that people have seen something over there, and so it may be. Again, I'm not going to put much weight in it, because we don't have much more evidence for that. But that will be interesting, but also that just means that there may be a heat source that is there, which potentially astronauts who are planning, both from the US-led Artemis mission and Chinese-led lunar base program as well, that means that there may be a heat source even today right under the surface. So there are implications for that, but this is one of those things you go yeah, science can actually change textbooks. This is one of the cases that if you were reading a textbook, astronomy textbook about the moon, it would say moon's volcanism actually stopped a few billion years ago, and it would make sense based on the theories of moon and the solar system formation comes in. But now it goes well, actually, no, it didn't. There may have been volcanism as recent as 100 million years or even less than that. So it's really cool. You think, hey, we know our moon. We have studied a lot. We have sent humans. Well, no, We sent humans to a few places, and now when we send people space probes and other things to a different place, we learn something different. And that goes back to this question that we have addressed a lot. The moon is a phenomenally interesting object for science. And it tells us about our own formations, because formation of the solar system and how planets form and the moon form. And so when we think about, and this is going to be my usual preaching regarding that, when we think about moon mining or think about exploiting its resources, well, there is a lot of science that can be done from there. Not just astronomy, because you can actually put telescopes, especially on the far side of the moon, but also lunar geology. So there is a lot of science. I really hope we protect the moon for science.
I also love that even though they didn't officially work together, the scientists from the United States and the scientists from China figuring out where to look, using each other's information to create a global picture of what our shared moon is all about.
And this was the case in the other Cold War, and I'm going to use the word other Cold War, because at that time as well, scientists were looking across, because you don't want to use old data. I mean, if somebody has newer data, you are going to use that to figure out where you want to land. You're going to figure out what kind of questions you want to know about, because the other questions have been answered. And so you don't want to, that's really boring if you answer the questions that have already been answered. But I should mention that even though in the US, NASA and anybody who works with NASA is almost barred from working with anybody from China on these things, but for the lunar samples that were brought in by Chang'e 5 and now Chang'e 6 from the far side of the moon, NASA did make an exception. They're like, well, if you have to borrow, we just don't have that. So there was an exception. This particular paper, I'm not 100% sure, but I think there was some collaboration with Caltech. So cooperation happens, and cooperation is good. Especially in this day and age when the world is inflamed, science and the global aspect of that and the time frames we talk about that. I think science can be used in terrible ways, but look at this. Science can be such a fantastic unifier. And again, it wakes us up from our slumber to think about the larger questions that we are asking. And it doesn't matter which side of the boundary you are on, because the moon doesn't care. Its volcanism doesn't care. But it's amazing that people can look at and figure out from those 3 beads out of those 3,000, there was volcanism here at 100 million years ago.
You hear that, China?
Wookiee has decided to express its own comments as well.
So China, if you're listening, Salman's big fan. You should help the visa process. He wants to go. He wants to go speak at your conference.
Well, thank you.
On the way, we go over the river and through the woods to the second farm under the purview of the Food Bank of Western Mass, and discover how they're not only feeding people, but fostering new farmers as well to help carry the torch.
But first, classic frights aplenty when we hear about the global gore that'll grace the screens at Images Cinema in Williamstown for their Nightmare on Spring Street series.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
NEPM's podcasts are funded by Armbrook Village, offering research-based arts, music, fitness, and lifelong learning programs at their assisted living and Alzheimer's care community in Westfield. armbrookvillage.com.
We are in the new lobby, or lobby bar, or lounge of Images Cinema.
Multi-purpose cool space.
Yeah, I love it. In Williamstown at this independent nonprofit theater with Dan Hudson, Executive Director of Images Cinema. Now, I don't know if you're calling it this year, and I know you've done it in years past, but Nightmare on Spring... This is Spring Street, right?
Yeah.
Nightmare on Spring Street for Halloween. Yeah. People love scary movies around this time of year. I love scary movies around this time of year. You have some...
Wicked cool ones coming.
Yeah, for Nightmare on Spring Street, we're celebrating Giallo, which is Italian horror, and we've got some restoration.
Can I make another There's Always Room for Jell-O joke?
It looks like a giant Jell-O mold.
I hate Jell-O.
Oh, come on, there's always room for Jell-O.
Only if Biafra is followed by...
Get her like your hair when Johnson lives inside your head.
Yeah, so we're going to show 4 films on late nights on Fridays and Saturdays in October by Dario Argento and Mario Bava, who are kind of considered like the masters of Italian horror. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
I feel like there's something special and kind of a little over the top about Italian horror that really brings Argento fans together, but like what really sets Italian horror, especially of that era, apart?
Is it like that episode 7 Fishes from The Bear? That's like my own personal Italian horror.
And I'm behind on the lobster. I mean, I have a question. His cousin, Michelle's friend, Stephen, is he gay?
Is who gay? Ma, why are you doing this 7 Fishes thing? Nobody ever eats it.
I've almost lived that.
That has got to be one of like the best episodes of television, like of all time. It's just like incredible.
With Master of Horror Jamie Lee Curtis.
Get upstairs.
Yeah, speaking of scream queens, there's always lots of damsels in distress, often being chased by knifed killers. So it's
Until they ultimately save themselves, usually.
Yeah. The final girls tend to escape at the end of these Italian horror films.
Phew.
One thing that's kind of interesting about the way that Italian films are shot is that in modern times they've kind of become a little bit more kind of Americanized, or like a lot of other Western filmmaking. But for a very long time, the director was behind the camera shouting action and different sort of emotive things to the performers. And so you get these like very large, very emotive performances, very heightened, very elevated. And then they would go back in and then dub over the dialogue later. So it kind of gives it also this additional kind of uncanny look sometimes too, because like the lips don't always match because they weren't like recording the dialogue on set, because the director's like more, bigger. And so that does kind of come through with the kind of the style of Italian horror, especially of the era, which is bigger, bolder, and it's also very much based in the sort of like more kind of thriller suspense type of horror as well too. So kind of more Hitchcockian in that way as well.
What else you got on tap for Nightmare on Spring Street for Halloween here at Images Cinema?
This isn't part of Nightmare on Spring Street, but I just saw at the Toronto Film Festival this film that is like blowing minds, and it definitely blew my mind as somebody who I thought I had seen it all. It's called The Substance.
Oh, really? I've seen a lot about this, and I've been intrigued. So I'm glad to know that it's like living up to the hype.
Oh yeah, I was like, yeah. Normally I'm like, yeah, but this movie goes places that I did not think it was gonna go, and then it keeps topping itself.
Have you ever dreamt of a better version of yourself? Younger, more beautiful.
It's like over 2 hours long, but it like completely earns every minute of it, because it's just like it keeps going further and it keeps like getting crazier and crazier, and it's definitely all-time body horror classic, like instantly, like everybody is saying it is. It's like,
I can't wait now. I was kind of on the fence about it too, because it was kind of overly hyped, and I was like, well, probably not that great. But if you're saying it as the executive director of this cinema here, I'm going to see it.
He curates all the things that get watched here.
If it blew your mind, it's gonna blow my mind.
Yeah, and also we're gonna have a double feature on Halloween of 2 classic monster movies kind of back to back. And that's going to be Thursday, October 31st. We're going to do it up. We're going to blow it out with a big double feature.
You're also doing an animation series, which is awesome, because not only is Nightmare Before Christmas kind of like bridging the gap there, but you're going to show Fantastic Planet.
I love that movie.
That movie is amazing.
Fascinating. A fine adventure story.
Man, you guys have great taste. We need to hang out more. So that series, it's going to be late nights on the weekends, so Fridays and Saturdays in November. And what inspired that series is another film by the director of Fantastic Planet just got a new digital restoration. So that's kind of been getting a little bit of a smaller release in independent and art house theaters. So we're going to show that film. It's called The Time Masters. And it's also a very like psychedelic, trippy, weird sci-fi movie. So in keeping with that theme, we're going to show some other like weird, trippy movies from the 70s and 80s.
Nice.
Yeah. Like heavy metal's a part of it.
Yeah.
Like you've got
heavy metal is also
heavy metal
excellent.
Heavy
metal, a step beyond science fiction.
Yeah, it is.
Animated, excellent, with voices of actual awesome rock stars.
Yeah, it is very much of its time and like a weirdly accurate like transcription of the magazine to screen somehow.
A series of bizarre short stories and nudity.
Yeah.
Animated on screen.
I mean, that's heavy metal writ large. But like you're closing with Son of the White Mare, which I think is awesome. This is a movie that I think only really came to the public maybe in the past like 5-ish years, and it's again like super technicolor, like really interesting plot wise, but like it's an interesting way to close out the series after having so many things that are kind of known quantities. To have something that only really recently has come to the fore, it's a good way to end.
I mean, this is kind of what curation is all about, right? Like, you know, you throw a couple things in there that are like a little bit more well known, and then you hope you and then exactly, and then like check this other thing out. If you like this, you're like this. You know, I'm a living, walking recommendation algorithm, right?
Yeah, I prefer the human algorithm. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, really.
Yeah. I have the best job in the world sometimes, you know? Yeah. It's pretty great.
Does Images Cinema do a membership drive?
Yeah, we had one back in the spring. So it was like May, June. We kind of had a spring membership drive. We also have, at the end of the year, like a lot of arts organizations, we have kind of like an end-of-year fundraising drive. And since a lot of people, their annual contribution is their membership, we have tax-deductible memberships. So that's kind of like a second membership drive that we do.
Are any of these events that are happening, I think the Indigenous Film Festival is, but are any of the other ones in conjunction with the other educational institutions around here?
Yeah, so right now also taking place on Tuesday nights, while the Civic Cinema series takes place on Monday nights. In partnership with the Russian and German department at Williams College, there's a German-Austrian film festival. That's become an annual, ongoing thing, and that's always free and open to the public as well.
Nightmare on Spring Street starts this Friday, October 4th, with Mario Bava's Blood and Black Lace. Find more information on all the movies playing for the series on their website.
And more movies tomorrow when we talk with Amherst Cinema.
More that will involve colleges, no less.
Yes, indeed. Time to visit the farm that is part of the reason I'll walk 43 miles from Springfield to Greenfield each year and hear how it's helping the organization broaden the ways it seeks to overcome hunger. A trip to the food bank farm is up next.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by UMass Amherst School of Public Policy, offering graduate programs in public affairs, public policy and administration, data analytics, and computational social science. umass.edu/SPP. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, offering co-op advantage checking with cash back on all purchases, plus secure debit card controls, all from the UMass 5 mobile banking app. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop.
Oh my God, your tomatoes are those tomatoes?
Those are tomatoes.
Those are ginormous.
Well, it's getting to be the season where we're going to be talking an awful lot about things that the food bank is up to. And we are here at the Food Bank Farm in Hadley with the executive director of the Food Bank of Western Massachusetts, Andrew Morehouse. Thanks for having us.
My pleasure. It's great to see you both here, Khalees and Monty, you know.
Khalees came from the south and landed exactly where you're supposed to go here, and I came from the north, and it sent me to like this tiny parking lot with a small Food Bank Farm sign. I'm like, where the hell am I, and where's everybody else, and where's all the farm action happening? But now I'm on the right side, and I see it's all happening.
You go to that part, and you have to imagine the farm.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's actually a good segue, because that side close to the farm is actually conservation land owned by the town of Amherst and maintained by Kestrel Land Trust, which was instrumental in helping us buy the food bank farm that you're standing on right now.
Nice.
And I had questions about that because I thought that your farm was on the other part of 47, like closer to where the Rotary is, because years and years ago, I had a farm share there.
This is a great way to begin this story today. That actually was and is still to this day the first food bank farm that we bought in 1992, and we partnered with the well-known, renowned Michael Doctor to start the very first food bank farm, and he managed it for about 15 years, first as an employee, and then he started his own business, and it was an incredible run, and we were so grateful to work with him. Then he moved.
And you may remember Michael Doctor now making mi tierra tortillas at all.
That's right.
I just got some at Food City and Turner's last weekend.
And helped handed over the reins of Winter Moon, the root vegetables.
So that's where he moved. He moved on down the street. He started up next barn over, then eventually sold that, started the business that you just described. When he left, his protege, who learned the tricks of the trade of CSA organic farming, Ben Peralt of Mountain View Farms, entered into a lease with the food bank to lease that land. And that's kind of been our model on that farm ever since, where we lease the land to local farmers, and in lieu of cash rent, they give us a share of the harvest. Many years later, fast forwarding, that was 1992 we started that, still own it today, partnering with Mountain View Farm. 2020, we bought this new farm off of Shattuck Road here in Hadley with the great assistance of the Kestrel Land Trust, who helped us secure funding from the state of Massachusetts through the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources to buy this farm. And we were able to get about another $500,000 in funding from other sources. We bought the farm and we pretty much replicated the same model. And I guess the main thing I want to say is there are 4 major reasons why these farms are so important and why the community invests in them. The first and foremost is that we're able to protect from development in perpetuity this farmland between the two farms. It's 67 acres of prime farmland, as well as hundreds of acres of wetlands and forests in perpetuity forever. That's the first thing. The second is that we're now able to provide 67 acres of prime farmland to local farmers to grow organic vegetables. Third, they're growing those organic vegetables for everybody, including people facing food insecurity, because we get a share of the harvest and distribute it through the food bank. And especially, we're also feeding kids in schools in the city of Springfield through the school meals, because they're buying local vegetables from the farmers who grow on this farm. And then lastly, we're educating the public about the benefits of regenerative farming, which we're practicing on this, what we call Regenerative Farming and Education Initiative. There's 2 acres of farming, which has 2 important benefits. 1, it sequesters carbon, and 2, it's sustainable farming. Through that farm, this initiative, the Cultivating for Community initiative, we're able to educate the public about the benefits of regenerative farming through workshops, volunteering, and school field trips with schools all up and down the valley. I should also say we're leasing 1 acre of land to an emerging farmer, because we're now transforming this farmland into an incubator for emerging farmers. So we have Benito Torres, who used to farm down in Holyoke, is now farming with us.
I think we talked.
I think we have talked to him.
Yeah. So all kinds
of. So then you essentially gift them the land; they can use it, but then you take a share that goes to the food bank.
In the case of Benito's land, because it's only 1 acre, the amount of produce that he would provide would be pretty minimal. So in this case, he is paying rent for the land, but it's a reduced price, because not only does he have access to 1 acre of land, but he has access to our greenhouses, our barn, some of our equipment, the irrigation system, and a lot of mentoring from Lee Gadway, our farm manager. So our hope is to recruit a second emerging farmer for next season, so that we can continue this path, and we have more available land to do that subsequently with every passing year.
Should we go talk to the farmers?
Yeah, let's do it. We've got the farmers and we've got a crew of volunteers here, and it's a beautiful day, and we're excited to have you guys.
Excited to finally be here. 2020, an interesting year to get involved with a farm.
Well, we bought it in 2020, so we really didn't farm that first year. We were in transition, and then the first year after that, 2021, is when we entered into our first lease agreement with our 2 organic commercial farmers, and I should mention them because they're great partners: Atlas Farm, Gideon Porth of Atlas Farm, and Joe Jakowski of Lakeside Organics Hadley. And they've been leasing the majority of the farmland and growing upwards to 60,000 pounds of vegetables every year, a portion of which comes to the food bank. And as I said, the rest they sell to the likes of Whole Foods Market and Trader Joe's, and also sell to the Springfield Public Schools to feed kids in the city.
Sounds like the farmers are listening to a childless cat lady.
Come on over, Amanda.
Hi. Good to see you.
I'm Amanda Reynolds. I work with the community engagement on the farm. I work with students and volunteers.
How many of these people are the farmers that are actively working here, and how many of them are volunteers right now?
So Danielle is our apprentice and Lee is our farm manager, but everyone else is volunteers. So we have about 7 volunteers right now.
Cool. How many volunteers in total are coming in and out of here day in and day out?
The numbers depend, but our regular volunteers, we can have up to 5, and then volunteer groups, we have up to 10.
A shift, yeah.
So we've had, I believe, about 900 hours of volunteers at this point.
Wow.
Yeah, and we have over 7 shifts for them to come. And we've had over 400 student hours as well.
And when the kids come out on a field trip, do they get into the weeds, literally?
They can. Yeah, they will do a couple of different things. They'll do a farming lesson where they will help with whatever is needed that day, like planting, or it could be weeding. Mm-hmm. And then they do a science lesson or something along with their curriculum. They do a forest walk, and then they do a nutrition demo too.
Tell us a little bit. I mean, school's just started right now, but how many groups have already been by?
So we've had a bunch of Springfield public schools come, and then we had a Chickpea, a summer program class come in the summer, and then we have Amherst and Springfield and hopefully another Chickpea coming.
Oh, cool. So like summer programs will come here too, if for kids who are, let's not say stuck.
Yeah.
During the height of the season.
Yeah, we try to have up to 5 field trips per like the spring and then the summer and then the fall. But we're trying to get out with the summer programs right now too.
With winters warming up, do you think that you'll eventually have educational things here during the winter as well?
We could. We'll have schools until the end of October. So yeah, if we keep going, and we also will have more greenhouse work for them too. And we have an educational section as well. So we could extend that and grow cherry tomatoes and other crops that can stay a little bit longer.
Are you still looking for volunteers? How much more of the season are you going to need to rely on volunteers here?
Yes, we definitely need volunteer work. We'll be going till around Halloween time.
Is one of those volunteers Ed Malachowski, the renowned DJ from Valley Free Radio and music lover throughout the valley?
Hey, how are you guys?
Hey, Ed. How's it going?
Good.
Hey, we match.
Oh, yeah, you're both wearing Green River Festival swag.
No ordinary volunteer. This is our stalwart volunteer.
Yeah? How much volunteering do you do here, Ed?
I do twice a week. Plus, I do the best part is delivering the produce to either the Survival Center or the First Baptist Church. Then you really see the good it does, because what we get out of this small plot is incredible.
What portion of the crops that you grow here end up being the produce that you're able to distribute? Do you know the percentage?
There are different ways to skin.
Yeah.
I won't say the proverbial skin that cat because that's a disgusting term.
Yeah, we already talked about the childless cat lady.
Nobody wants to talk about the debate anymore. So.
I wasn't referring to that. You know, as Lee, the farm manager, will tell you, right now we've harvested about 6,000 pounds on Cultivating for Community, this regenerative farming and education initiative. If you add that into what the 2 farms who are leasing land here and the farm over on Bay Road, the food bank farm there, is providing, between the 3 of them, we're at about 60,000 pounds of organic vegetables right now, and with another month of the growing and harvesting season.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's
it is
a
awesome.
Lot.
Yeah. I'm interested in the Springfield Public Schools relationship too with the meals program. Tell us how that came about and how it manifests itself. What does it look like on the plate at lunchtime there?
Well, how did it come about? As things go, oftentimes a generous and visionary funder makes the match. And so in this case, the Henry P. Kendall Foundation in Boston is led by Andrew Kendall, has an incredible vision, and he and I talked several years ago, and he said, hey, you know, you've got this food bank farm, you want to buy a second one. If you're interested in making a connection between food security and local schools that want to source local vegetables, we'll invest in the food bank farm. So in fact, the Henry P. Kendall Foundation made a major investment to help us purchase the farm. Moving fast forward, so now we have a close relationship with Homegrown Springfield, the food service vendor for the city of Springfield, and they've been buying food from Atlas Farm and Gideon Porth at Atlas Farm and Joe Jakowski at Lakeside Organics, and preparing it in their school meals. And right now we actually come to think of it, we have an application to that very same foundation that would, if we are awarded the funding, we'll be able to purchase farm equipment so that the two farmers can grow even more vegetables and sell more organic vegetables to the homegrown Springfield and to feed kids in the city of Springfield.
It's also awesome that Michael Doctor, who was the shepherd of the first food bank farm, is now working at Mi Tierra making tortillas. Those tortillas are grown, the corn's grown here in Hadley. Those are in the Springfield Public Schools too, to have, for many people, what feels more culturally appropriate food for their lunch, but is still good and organic and grown right here in Hadley.
That's right. And in fact, because this partnership is so important to us, we received a USDA Farm to School grant, and we're now working with the City of Springfield, Homegrown Springfield, and the Science Department in the elementary schools to develop a Farm to School curriculum. And that's part of the school field trips, is that kids learn in the classroom and then they come out to the farm to get their hands dirty and learn where some of the food that they eat comes from.
Coming up, more at the Food Bank Farm,
including its history and a little more about the specifics of what's being grown and distributed with farm manager Lee Gadway, food bank director Andrew Morehouse, and more. There's a lot of people on that farm.
Yeah, you're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
Woo! What was this farm before the food bank bought it? What was this land?
That's a great question. It's been a farm for over 100 years. It was called the Shala Farm. A Polish farmer owned it for many, many years. And in fact, the grandfather of Joe Jakowski, who farms it now, used to farm this land. So it goes back. There's a lot of history here. You can see the tobacco barns here. So they were formerly, some of the farmers grew tobacco. Then there was immediately before us, there was a CSA farmer who was leasing it. And luckily we were able to buy it. And as I said, it's protected as farmland and wetlands and forest land in perpetuity, thanks to a agricultural preservation restriction with the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources.
Ed, you're doing the weigh-in about how many vegetables are going where. What are we at?
387 pounds today of about 14 different types of vegetables.
And you're going to take that to where?
First Baptist Church today.
That's great.
How many drop-offs happen a week? There's like 3 happening today.
It's 3 a week.
It's 3 weeks.
Yeah, we drop off twice a week, and United Way of Pioneer Valley picks up.
That's a good lot of fresh, healthy vegetables for folks in Amherst going to that Baptist church.
And in the context of things, that all feeds into the food that the food bank distributes, which we're trending towards 17 million pounds by the end of this month for a fiscal year of 12 months.
Wow.
About 115,000 people every month.
The need is still great.
It is. Survival Center was packed yesterday. Packed, unfortunately.
Fortunately that they're there. Unfortunately that they still have to be.
Yes.
2 car loads. Francis took some, and I took some. We're gonna overload the First Baptist Church.
I hope you're ready, Baptists.
And not Baptist. I'm pretty sure that it's not just Baptist.
Yeah. Andrew Morehouse from the food bank here at the Food Bank Farm in Hadley. Is there a potential to expand? Is there more land that you have access to, or are you doing as much as you can with the land that you have through the Kestrel Trust originally right now?
That's a great question. We actually just bought 5 acres that was nestled within this farm that was owned by another farmer. The former farmer of it was growing tobacco and using fertilizers or chemical fertilizers and pesticides and all that. So we have to let that land sit for 3 years before we can farm it organically. So that'll be available for emerging farmers that I was describing earlier. But we do have our sights on potentially a third food bank farm sometime down the road, and we're scoping out the opportunities because we'd like to have access to high traffic to have a farm stand so that all the emerging farmers who are growing vegetables here could sell them in a high volume, high visibility traffic area like Route 5.
Yeah.
Hint, hint.
Or Route 116 where I pulled off of into the wrong part of the food bank farm.
That'll work too. Hey, Lee. You got a second? You want to talk to our friend Monty? Hey.
And this is Khalees.
Hey, nice to meet you. Lee Gadway, farm manager. I already know you.
Hey.
Lee Gadway, the farm manager here. Tell us what's going on today.
Today we're harvesting for First Baptist Church of Amherst.
Beans.
Yes, we just wrapped up beans, which go on forever, even though it only seems like there's 8 beds. They somehow keep proliferating as we keep going through them. It seems like they just multiply.
It's been a weirdly good year for beans.
It has.
These beans will be harvested, and then Ed or somebody will drive them right to the Baptist church, and will there be a food distribution there, or how's it going to work?
Yes, First Baptist Church of Amherst has a distribution in the afternoon. Today's a unique day. The nutrition team and myself are actually going over, and we're going to be doing a processing of what to do with our harvests and showing people how to cook and process. I'll be there to answer questions. It's a big joke that I'm going to talk about okra. I've literally only eaten okra 3 times.
Okra's delicious!
Yeah, it is good.
And it's been raw every single time.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, I started nerding out about okra. I got the book, The Whole Okra. It's a seed to stem book. But okra's the vegetable of the future.
Kickboxing, sport of the future.
Which is a new sport, but I think it's got a good future.
We also deliver to Amherst Survival Center and United Way of Pioneer Valley. All 3 of those distribute our food once a week. Amherst Survival Center is open 5 or 6 days a week. They process food on a daily basis where people can come in and get lunch, or they can come in and get raw goods, unprocessed food, and then bring it home. And then United Way of Pioneer Valley is also, when they get it, they are distributing it to 4 different distribution sites.
In Hampden County.
Yes, in Hampden County.
Talk a little bit about the regenerative farming stuff that's going on right here. That's something we've talked about a couple of times on the show. It seems to be also a very future-looking way of practicing farming.
Regenerative agriculture is, in my opinion, the only way to farm. It's better for the environment, it's better for the soil, it's better for the crops, which is better for us to eat. There, over time, will be less inputs. The soil will regenerate itself. These beans are not just growing beans right now, they're also adding nitrogen to the soil, which all plants need nitrogen. So once we cut them all down, all of that nitrogen stays in the soil for the next crop. A couple of crops like beans and peas produce a surplus of nitrogen, more than they need, so that stays in the soil for the next harvest, for the next crop, whatever we decide to put here.
You're eating one of the beans.
I was given a bean.
Delicious.
Did you do farming before this?
You can also have a bean.
Andrew Morehouse from the Food Bank handed me a bean on the Food Bank farm.
I've been farming for about 10 years now. I've always had a green thumb as far back as elementary school. I remember being the one that volunteered to bag up trees for Arbor Day at my elementary school. And then it's just slowly grew. I started farming because I had learned how little food on the East Coast is produced on the East Coast. It was a insignificant amount, and I wanted to help be the person and part of the group that grew that number.
Is it different farming here, knowing that the food you're growing, a lot of it is going to go to people who might not otherwise have access to this kind of fresh, healthy food?
That part is amazing to me. Growing up, I was a recipient of food stamps, and you just get sometimes not great food. Here, I am producing as best as I can to a CSA that I would be producing. So our recipients are getting tomatoes that they might not regularly see outside of like a farm stand.
Khalees was admiring them in the greenhouse.
Yeah, they're huge.
We've had green zebras, we had Berkeley pink tie-dyes, sun golds, we had little red cherry tomatoes, we've got mushroom baskets, all different colors. You want to see the color of a rainbow when you're eating.
Paint your plate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Paint your plate.
That's why I eat Skittles exclusively.
Yeah.
Skittles, bite-sized candies, taste the rainbow of the flavors.
That's the wrong lesson to take from this. But you have daikon, you have the fun striped zucchini, and a pile of Swiss chard here. I've seen kohlrabi and cabbage, even though people don't, there's lots of things you can do with kohlrabi. People don't just keep taking it and groaning to yourself that you don't have anything to do with the kohlrabi that shows up. But there's so much variety here, and it's really important because, as you say, we also, when I was young, had supplemental food things, and it was always packages.
Yeah.
And I don't know how my mom managed to make sure that we always had vegetables of some sort, but she did, and it was really important. And it's really important to get that exposure as early as possible so that you don't grow up and hate vegetables.
Yeah. Like I did. You also have a lot of flowers here. I mean, we've talked about this a lot on the show, too, that the notion of bread and roses that people need to eat, but people deserve the breadth and depth of life and joy, regardless of their economic situation. Do these flowers ever make it into any of the distribution sites or to the pantries or anything like that?
Currently, they have not. They're mostly here for pollinators as part of our regenerative agriculture. Next year, we're looking at more of ways that we could donate. It would be really great to box up these as bouquets and also be able to donate that. The biggest thing we've come into the trouble with this year is time for harvest.
Yeah. Maybe if you had some more volunteers,
yeah,
that
would be amazing. What I would like to say is invite the public to come visit the Food Bank Farm. You can check out our website, foodbankfarmwma.org, and click on Get Involved, and you'll see Food Bank Farms. And if you're not interested in volunteering, you can just walk on the farm roads. There are trails that are managed by Kestrel Land Trust for the public to see and view. And we'll have signs coming up soon that explain the history of this farm and the history of the land and what we're doing here on Cultivating for Community.
If farming and walking in hiking paths is not your bag, what if you want to walk a long way, or a short part of a long way, on the March for the Food Bank? That's coming up Thanksgiving week as well, and those details will be forthcoming shortly. And I'm sure we're going to have more conversations. We're going to have more conversations with people who interact with the food bank and talk about issues surrounding hunger and food insecurity and how it affects the 4 counties of Western Mass.
Absolutely. Check out our website at home. On the homepage right there, you'll see ways you can get involved, support the mission of the food bank, and more importantly, help us end hunger, because together we end hunger.
The unofficial anthem of the Food Bank March.
I know, it's my favorite Clash song.
I love the Clash so much and that song, but it does give me a little bit of trauma every time I hear it now, because I know
because you're like,
I'm going to have to walk.
The walk is coming.
Yes, and it's
the walk is coming.
Sign-ups for that will begin a week from tomorrow.
Yay.
So if you're interested, and I should mention, I guess the food bank we just heard is an underwriter. So, and we do a lot of work with the food bank, but I think they're a great organization.
They are.
Yes.
Feeding people is a good cause, period.
I think so, too.
Indeed.
Tomorrow on the Fabulous 4013, more farming. It's October, and though you wouldn't think of it, it's the perfect time to get your hands in the dirt and to start growing something, and we'll do that in South Hadley at Ben and Meg's Farm and Garden Store.
I know, that's right. I literally just ordered cover crops for my garden.
Nice.
And we'll bring the 5 colleges together, Voltron-like, to explore their cinematic powers together when we speak with folks from Amherst Cinemas about their 5-on-film series, which starts October 1st. That's tomorrow night. And maybe get a quick peek at the retrophilic selection they're bringing for the Spookiest too.
And try not to think too hard about the verbal confrontations that we'll witness at White Lion in Amherst in the evening, but you should totally come and join us to bear witness as NEPM plays host to the VP debate viewing party.
Will there be flies on heads this time? You'll just have to be there to find out.
Low, like that last vice presidential
Yeah, like
debate.
the last one where the fly just hung out on Pence's head for like way too long.
I'm sure there'll be plenty to talk about.
Oh, God.
We'll see you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.